The 2025 Wolfman remake had everything it needed to be a powerful horror drama, a talented director, an emotionally rich concept, and an individually strong cast. Most intriguing of all was its attempt to reframe lycanthropy as a metaphor for degenerative illness, a hauntingly tragic angle that should have made for a deeply affecting film. But instead of delivering on this chilling premise, the movie instead squandered it, along with nearly everything else that could have made it great. So how did Wolfman waste its most haunting idea? And what else went wrong along the way? Well, let's break it down, starting with the general execution and the film's most glaring flaws, which turned what could have been a deeply emotional and terrifying experience into one of the most disappointing horror films of the year. Well, for a start, the pacing was a mess. The movie felt painfully slow and the narrative meandering. What should have been a tense, tragic descent into madness instead dragged its feet, stretching out scenes that didn't need to be so long whilst skipping over the moments that actually mattered. Horror thrives on build-up, but here, the extensive build-up led nowhere, just a sluggish, meandering experience that tested the audience's patience. It also doesn't help that the lead actors have zero chemistry together. At the core of this version of the Wolfman is the relationship between the husband, who slowly succumbs to lycanthropy, and his wife, who struggles to hold on to the man she loves. This setup has real potential for emotional weight, but the problem? The two lead actors simply didn't click. Their performances felt disconnected, their interactions robotic. So when the story needed us to feel the pain of their crumbling relationship, it just wasn't there. They didn't seem to have anything in common with each other at all. And worse, the script set up an undercurrent of resentment that never actually goes anywhere. For instance, early on the film hints at tension between them. He's a struggling author whose career is floundering. "I'm between jobs," he says. In a way that suggests it's been that way for a while now. He's essentially a stay-at-home dad, while she's a journalist whose career is finally taking off. In a kitchen scene early in the movie, this bitterness is lightly touched upon through passive-aggressive sarcasm, with him making an offhanded remark by saying,
"You're the only one that has important stuff going on, right? I'm not busy at all."
If I ever have kids, I'm never gonna fight in front of them.
We're not fighting, honey. We're having a spirited exchange.
It's an interesting setup. There's potential for his growing resentment to fuel his later transformation, making his descent into the disease even more tragic. But then, nothing bloody happens. This early tension just straight up disappears from the movie. He never starts losing his temper or lashing out at her over her job. He never has that raw, unfiltered moment where he cuts her with the truth, telling her how he really feels without restraint, how that deep down he resents her success whilst he flounders. As the transformation progresses, you'd expect the werewolf condition to strip away his filters, exposing ugly emotions he might have repressed before. But instead, the film just skips over all of it. It's as if 20% of the movie got deleted, the part that should have shown his deterioration, the resentment growing into something uncontrollable, the illness erasing the man he once was, piece by piece. And instead, we just cut to the aftermath, where the wife is now in the basement crying over the radio about how her husband is no longer himself apparently. The heart of the tragedy, the part that should have been felt, is simply missing, because we never saw it. Oh, and also, why does the daughter look about 10 but constantly act and speak like a 5-year-old?
Why does Daddy have to get sick? Sick like Daddy? I want him back the way he was.
Anyway, one of the film's boldest ideas was reinterpreting lycanthropy as a metaphor for degenerative illnesses like Alzheimer's. In theory, this is brilliant. It could have been a haunting, tragic way to explore the loss of self and the impact on our loved ones. But in execution, the film completely rushed through the most crucial part of that journey. As alluded to earlier, we don't actually see or experience the gradual deterioration of the husband's mind. And instead, the movie just jumps forward in time and suddenly, he's just there, sitting on the couch and unable to understand his wife's words or even the English language anymore. This moment is meant to be heartbreaking, but it feels totally unearned due to its lack of nuance or build-up. True degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's are subtle in how they rob people of their identity. We could have seen him gradually losing his patience with his family, working himself into a frustrating maelstrom of chaos as his body falls apart and he can no longer find the words to express himself. But here, it's just a simple switch flipping, completely skipping the emotional build-up that would have made the metaphor more powerful. As I can unfortunately attest from personal experience, what makes Alzheimer's so devastating is a slow, creeping loss of memory, language, and the hollowing out of personality. But instead of showing all this unfold, the film takes a clumsy and lazy shortcut, where suddenly the husband can't even understand English anymore, as if his entire brain just shut down overnight. And the result? Instead of an eerie, realistic descent into confusion, it now plays like a cheap plot device rushed to its conclusion. The audience doesn't feel the slow, tragic unravelling of a good family man just trying to do his best for his daughter. Just a jarring leap from functional to completely gone. At the end of the day, this is still Wolfman, a horror story, and yet for a film about a man turning into a monster, it's shockingly light on actual horror. The transformation scenes are uninspired, the scares are practically non-existent, and worst of all, it never truly commits to being a werewolf movie. It seems to want to be an emotional drama, but it doesn't even get that part right, mainly because it's too lazy to put in the work to draw the arc of the characters and their experiences. I mean, even the supposed subtext of generational trauma and abuse completely falls apart, because every time the movie flashes back to being a moment that's meant to be an example of harsh, overbearing parenting, it just ends up making perfect sense. Like, yes, you should listen to your father and stay close when learning how to hunt, especially when you're a kid wandering into the woods alone, holding a gun that's half your size and with no bloody real idea how to use it. That's just basic survival, and not some deep-seated emotional trauma that should haunt you till you're an adult. And then there's a scene where a parent tells their kid not to play on bollards right next to a busy road. Again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that just seems like responsible parenting, and totally not a moment of devastating cruelty. Same with asking for basic respect, like not taking a loud phone call right as everyone's about to sit down for dinner. Yet somehow, the film frames all of these moments as if they're examples of horrific authoritarian parenting. It's bloody bizarre. Instead of making the audience sympathise with the character's trauma, it just makes us wonder why the movie thinks basic safety and courtesy are unreasonable demands. And don't even get me started on the Madam Web meme level writing.
It's my job to protect you. And I didn't. And I'd never be able to forgive myself if this stayed with you. You know, if it scarred you. Or sometimes when you're a daddy, you're so scared of your kids getting scars that you become the thing that scars them.
What?
Ultimately, the 2025 Wolfman remake indeed had ambition, but ambition means nothing without execution. With a frustratingly slow pace, a lack of emotional depth, and a botched metaphor for degenerative illness, the film failed to deliver on both horror and drama. There's only so far interesting cinematography and visual design can get you. At some point there has to be meat on the bones. But at the end of the day, it's a movie that could indeed have been haunting and heartbreaking, but alas, it left most audiences feeling nothing at all. So what did you think of this flick? Did the Wolfman remake sink its claws into you? Or were you just as frustrated by its wasted potential? Maybe you found some hidden bite in its themes, or maybe like me, you were simply left howling at the screen, wondering if half the movie got lost in the editing room. But either way, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks again for watching, if indeed you still are, and haven't run off into the woods in sheer frustration.